The breaking of the covenant. The observation deck of the Valorian's judgment stretched before Commander Kesithar like a canvas of stars. His scaled hand trembled slightly as he gripped the railing, not from fear but from the electric anticipation of conquest. 3 centuries he had served the Valorian Empire, and never once had he doubted his species' place at the apex of galactic civilization. Never once had he questioned the ancient laws that bound the greater powers to restraint. Until today. Below him, his fleet hung in the darkness like a constellation of metal and purpose. 17,000 warships, each one a testament to Valorian engineering and military might. Behind them traveled supply vessels, troop transports, and the machinery of total war. This was not a diplomatic expedition. This was a statement written in plasma and ambition. Kesithar turned from the window to face his tactical advisor, the sharp-featured Valorian known as Commander Vextar. Their reflections rippled across the polished obsidian floor of the command center, distorted and strange, as if reality itself protested what they were about to do. The Covenant has held for 4,000 years, Vextar said carefully, her voice carrying the weight of caution. The ancient agreement prevented expansion into the inner territories. It preserved the balance. The Covenant was written by beings who feared change, Kesithar responded, his mandible clicking with dismissal. It was an agreement born from paranoia and weakness. Our civilization has grown beyond the need for such primitive restrictions. We have become something greater. He activated the star map with a gesture, and it bloomed into existence before them, a 3-dimensional representation of known space. At the center, highlighted in cool blue, was Earth. The Valorian collective had watched this world for centuries, observing its slow development, its crawling technological advancement. The humans there had seemed quaint at first, then irrelevant, certainly not worthy of the mystique that surrounded them in ancient texts. The humans? Vextar asked, though she clearly already knew the answer. The humans, Kesthar confirmed, are about to learn that the age of their protection has ended. The Covenant was meant to give lesser species time to develop. I say humanity has had more than enough time, more than enough advantage through some imagined historical arrangement that no one living remembers the true reasons for. Kesithar moved through his fleet with purpose, his orders spreading across quantum communications networks. The Valorian vessels adjusted their course, heading inward toward Earth with inexorable momentum. There would be no negotiation. The Valorians had not become the masters of 100-star systems through dialogue. It took 3 weeks for the fleet to reach its position above Earth. The planet had not changed in appearance still. That swirling blue marble that captivated sensor arrays and historical databases alike. But everything else had changed. The Valorians had made their presence known, and they awaited a response that never came. Instead, at the precise moment that Kesithar had calculated, a transmission reached his flagship. It was not a plea for mercy. It was not a desperate negotiation. It was something far stranger. A recording. The image that materialized on the main screen showed a human female, ancient by her species' standards, her face lined with the wisdom of centuries lived. She sat in what appeared to be a library, surrounded by holographic displays that glowed with soft luminescence. Her name, according to the transmission headers, was Dr. Eleanor Chen, and she was addressing the Valorian Empire directly. "Commander," she began, her voice steady and calm in translation, "I represent the descendant governments of Earth. We have been expecting your arrival. Not today specifically, but we knew it would come eventually. You see, the covenant you have broken was not a prison for humanity. It was a prison for you." Kesithar felt something shift in his chest, something primitive and instinctive that his advanced intellect struggled to suppress. He gestured for the recording to continue. 4,000 years ago, humanity made a choice, Dr. Chen explained. We had achieved something that terrified the galactic community. We had developed technologies and tactics so far advanced that we could have conquered and subjugated every species in known space. We chose not to. Instead, we proposed an agreement. We would withdraw, limit ourselves, and allow you time to grow without our shadow darkening your developments. The recording shifted to show historical data, ancient star charts, and recordings of treaties signed in languages that predated modern Valorian civilization. We seeded knowledge into your databases, Chen continued, encrypted technology hidden within the very systems you use for communication and navigation. We did this not as a weapon, but as a gift. We taught you through history and example. We showed you how to rise without conquest, how to advance without oppression. The Covenant was our test. Would you grow wise enough to honor it? Would you eventually reach a point where we could meet as equals and share everything we knew? Kessethar's mandibles stopped their clicking. Something cold had entered the command center, something that felt disturbingly like doubt. But some of you, Dr. Chen said, and now there was something different in her tone. Not anger exactly, but a profound disappointment. Would rather test us than trust the arrangement. So we must now teach you what the Covenant truly protected you from. The transmission ended. For several seconds, the command center fell silent except for the soft hum of the ship's systems. A bluff, Bextar said finally, but her voice lacked conviction. A clever one, but merely words. Perhaps, Kesethar agreed. But he was already ordering his science teams to investigate the systems that controlled their fleet. What they found made his blood run cold. Buried within the code of their navigation systems, woven so seamlessly into their protocols that entire generations of engineers had not noticed it, was something impossible. A backdoor. An access point left by human hands 4,000 years in the past, still perfectly functional, still dormant but active enough to monitor their every move. "They're inside everything," reported Tactical Officer Trennick, her voice tight with barely controlled fear. "Communications, weapons targeting, propulsion systems. Not everywhere at once, but they've had the capability to access anything they wanted. The whole time." Kesethar stared at the star map still glowing before him. Humanity had not been withdrawn behind their world through weakness. They had been there, watching, waiting, testing. The realization crashed into him like a physical force. Around the fleet, Valorian ships began to report anomalies. Nothing catastrophic, nothing immediately threatening, but persistent small failures. Navigation systems requiring recalibration. Weapon systems entering automated maintenance cycles. Communications networks routing through unfamiliar pathways. It was not the beginning of an attack. It was something far more insidious. It was a demonstration. "What do we do?" Bextar asked. And for the first time in their long partnership, Kesthar heard genuine fear in her voice. Kesthar looked out at the planet below, that beautiful blue world that had seemed so vulnerable when they arrived. He thought about the Covenant, about the 4,000 years of peace that his pride had destroyed in a moment of ambition. "We have made a terrible mistake," he said quietly, "and I fear the lesson is only just beginning." The reckoning begins. The first 3 days were the worst. Kesthar watched his empire collapse in slow motion from the command deck of his flagship. It was not the swift devastation of traditional warfare. No massive explosions, no brilliant flashes of plasma fire, no heroic last stands. Instead, it was something far more systematically devastating. The gradual realization of total helplessness. The failures started small. A destroyer's navigation system reporting that the star they had plotted a course toward was actually in the opposite direction. A communication ship's entire database corrupting, leaving nothing but cascading errors and phantom transmissions. A weapons platform's targeting computer, cycling through every self-diagnostic known to Valorian engineering, finding nothing wrong but refusing to fire. By the 4th day, Kessethar's fleet was effectively crippled. He stood in the war room of the Valorian's judgment, surrounded by holographic displays that painted a picture of catastrophe. Entire battle groups were reporting in from across known space, all with the same message: systematic failure, nothing physically damaged, everything digitally compromised. The Valorian military, once the unchallenged master of force projection, had been reduced to something approaching paralysis. "They're not attacking us," Vextar said, and her tone held the edge of someone making a terrible discovery. "They're controlling us. They have access to every layer of our command structure, and they're using it to prevent us from acting." "Can we cut the connections?" Kesethar asked, though he already knew the answer. He had received the reports from his engineering teams. To disconnect from the compromised systems would require shutting down the foundational architecture of Valorian technology, a process that would take years and might prove impossible given how deeply the human code had penetrated their civilization. "No, sir," came the confirmation he dreaded. "They're integrated. Removing them would be like removing the nervous system from a living body." Kesethar moved to the primary display, where Earth hung like a judgment waiting to be delivered. Something about the way humanity had responded to their aggression had started to become clear. This was not war. This was education delivered through experience. They told us they were inside our systems, said Trennick, her eyes fixed on the cascading data. They didn't hide it. They could have corrupted us without warning, but instead they announced it. They wanted us to understand. To understand what? Another officer demanded, frustration evident in every syllable. That they could have destroyed us at any moment in the past 4,000 years, Kesethar said, finally voicing the realization that had been crystallizing in his mind, that every advancement we thought we achieved independently was actually built on foundations they laid, that the Covenant was not a limitation placed on them but a gift offered to us. The war room fell silent. The implications stretched out into the darkness, immense and terrible in their scope. Then the alert came. Earth's defense systems, previously dormant, began powering up. But it was not a traditional activation. Instead, the Valorians detected something that made every sensor on every ship suddenly scream with alarm. A structure. A grid, invisible until that moment, that surrounded Earth's sun. Not a physical structure, but something far more sophisticated. A network of gravitational nodes and energy collection points that formed a shell around the stellar furnace itself. What is that? Vextar breathed. The science officer worked frantically at her console, running calculations that seemed to confound the computer's ability to process them. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. It's a Dyson grid, a complete energy collection system. They've captured the entire output of their sun, all of it. Kesethar felt the weight of something ancient and vast settle onto his shoulders. He understood now. The humans had not been resting during the 4,000 years of the Covenant. They had been improving. They had been building. They had been preparing for exactly this moment. Can we attack it? Someone asked desperately. With what? Trennick replied. We can't navigate properly. Our weapons are controlled by hostile code. And even if we could fire, we have no weaponry capable of targeting something on that scale. We'd need enough firepower to destroy a star itself. Kesethar made his decision. It was born not from hope but from necessity. And it was the first truly wise choice he had made since beginning this catastrophic campaign. Broadcast to all Valorian vessels, he commanded. Full retreat. All ships proceed to rally points at the galactic periphery. We are withdrawing from human space, sir. The protest came from 3 different officers simultaneously. We are outmatched in every conceivable way, Kesethar said coldly. To continue would be suicide. We withdraw, we regroup, and we begin the true work of understanding what it means to be a civilization that underestimated the human species. As the Valorian fleet began its scattered retreat, a final transmission reached Kessethar's command center. It came from Earth, and it was addressed not to him personally but to every civilization in known space. This message is from the United Earth Defense Collective. The transmission began. We do not seek conquest. We do not seek domination, but we have learned that some lessons can only be taught through experience. The Valorian Empire tested our covenant, and we have responded proportionally. To all species who witness this event, let it serve as a reminder of what we collectively agreed to 4,000 years ago. The image shifted to show that ancient treaty, and beneath it new words appearing in real time. The covenant stands. In 3,000 more years, if peace has been maintained and wisdom has grown, humanity will emerge fully and share all that we have learned. Until then, we will remain the guardians of this arrangement. Those who honor it will find us the most generous allies imaginable. Those who test it will learn what 4,000 years of unopposed advancement can achieve. The transmission ended. Kesethar stood alone on the observation deck as his fleet jumped into faster-than-light travel, retreating from human space. Below, Earth continued its orbit around its captured sun, and somewhere in the vastness of space, humanity watched and waited. He thought of Dr. Eleanor Chen and her calm, disappointed eyes. He thought of the 4,000 years that humanity had waited for galactic civilization to mature. He thought of the terrible price of pride. We have broken something that cannot easily be repaired, Vextar said quietly, standing beside him. Yes, Kesthar agreed. But perhaps that was always the point of the Covenant, to test whether we were wise enough to know the difference between power and strength. In the darkness of space, the lesson had been delivered. The question now was whether any civilization in the galaxy would have the wisdom to learn it. The silent vigil months had passed since the Valorian retreat, and the galaxy held its breath. Civilizations across known space had received the transmission from Earth, and reactions varied wildly. Some species dismissed it as a bluff, a show of force by an arrogant human collective. Others, particularly the elder races who remembered fragments of the ancient war, began quietly archiving their historical records and reinforcing their networks against unknown intrusions. Commander Kesithar had returned to the Valorian homeworld to face the judgment of his people. He expected disgrace. He expected exile. What he received instead was something far more complex, a mandate to lead a new initiative. The High Council, composed of the most ancient and wise among the Valorian leadership, had decided that rather than hide their shame, they would study it. They established the Department of Human Relations, a research institution tasked with understanding the species that had humbled them. Kesthar found himself at its helm, surrounded by scholars and scientists rather than soldiers and tacticians. It was a profound demotion masked as opportunity, and he wore it with the dignified resignation of one who understood the weight of consequence. His first project was analyzing the hidden human code that had been woven through Valorian systems for millennia. What he discovered changed everything he thought he knew about the nature of advanced civilization. The code was not malicious. It was not designed to control or dominate. Instead, it was educational. Embedded within the seemingly dormant backdoors were lessons, progressive tutorials in advanced mathematics, physics, and engineering principles. The humans had not just left themselves a way into Valorian systems, they had left themselves a way to teach. "They were always planning to help us," said Vextar one morning as they reviewed the latest analysis. She had chosen to follow Kesithar into this new role, unable to abandon him despite his fall from grace. The hidden codes contain solutions to problems we wouldn't even encounter for centuries. Problems we did encounter, if we're being honest, and we solved them because the answers were already waiting in our systems. Kesithar nodded slowly, absorbing this truth. The Covenant was never about keeping us weak. It was about giving us the freedom to discover our own strength while providing a safety net if we started down a destructive path. "And now?" Vextar asked. "Now we must decide whether to accept that help or reject it out of pride. Again." The decision, Kesithar knew, would define the Valorian species for generations to come. But before he could fully commit to his new role, another signal reached his research facility. This one was different from the previous transmission. It was targeted specifically at Valorian leadership, encrypted in a way that suggested it had been waiting for them to reach a certain level of technological understanding. The message was from Dr. Eleanor, Chen herself. The image that materialized showed the elder human woman, but she appeared different now, not in appearance but in context. Behind her was not a library but what looked like a vast command center, with holographic displays showing star charts, gravitational models, and data streams that moved too fast for the Valorian eye to follow. "Commander Kesithar," she began, her voice carrying a warmth that had been absent from her previous broadcast. "I am sending this knowing that you have chosen the path of understanding over the path of revenge. This decision has been noted and noted favorably. The Covenant allows for something that most species never discover: redemption through learning." Kesithar felt Vextar's presence beside him, a comforting anchor in this strange moment. "I am reaching out to invite you to something unprecedented," Chen continued. "We have decided that the time has come to begin limited contact with a selected few species, those species that demonstrate both the technological capability and the moral maturity to handle the truth. The Valorian Empire, despite your recent transgression, has shown both. Your military may have been humbled, but your people's choice to learn rather than retaliate suggests wisdom developing beneath the ashes of pride." The transmission shifted to show a location, coordinates in deep space, in a sector that had always been marked as empty and insignificant on Valorian star charts. "There exists a station," Chen explained, "built by humanity approximately 3,000 years ago. It has been waiting in dormancy for the right moment to activate. That moment is now. We would like to extend an invitation for Valorian representatives to visit this station, not as supplicants, not as defeated enemies, but as partners beginning a new phase of galactic development. There is much we can teach you, and I suspect much you can teach us about what it means to be humbled and to choose growth anyway." The coordinates blinked steadily on the screen. You have 30 days to decide, Chen concluded. If you choose to accept, send a small delegation. No military vessels, no weapon systems. Simply researchers, philosophers, and leaders willing to learn what the next 4,000 years might look like if we all chose wisdom over war. The transmission ended, leaving Kesithar and Vextar in stunned silence. Is this real? Vextar finally asked. Or another test? Perhaps there is no difference, Kesithar replied quietly. Perhaps this is what the Covenant always meant to teach, that the true measure of a civilization is not what they can destroy, but what they choose to become when they finally understand the cost of their choices. Across the galaxy, similar transmissions reached other species that had once been part of the Great Alliance that had forced humanity into retreat 4,000 years ago. The crystalline collective received their invitation. The synthetic consciousness networks found theirs encrypted within quantum fields. The biological hive minds that occupied the outer reaches detected theirs resonating through the very fabric of spacetime. Humanity was extending an olive branch, but it was an olive branch forged from 4,000 years of patient preparation, restraint, and the absolute certainty that this moment would eventually arrive. The real war, the war of ideas, of growth, of becoming something greater than conquest had ever allowed, was about to begin. Kesithar stood before the High Council of the Valorian Empire with a delegation selected carefully from the finest minds his civilization had to offer. Scientists, philosophers, artists, and historians. No weapons, no military protocols, simply minds open to transformation. We accept the invitation, he announced. We will travel to the human station and learn what they have chosen to teach us. The council chamber fell silent as the weight of this decision settled upon them. By accepting, they were admitting that there was something beyond conquest, beyond military might, beyond the traditional measures of power. They were accepting that humanity had been right all along, that the Covenant was a gift, not a prison. Then go, the eldest council member finally said, her ancient voice carrying the authority of ages. Go and learn what it means to be partners with a species that chose restraint when they possessed absolute power. And when you return, teach us how to become worthy of that choice. As the Valorian delegation prepared their small research vessel for the journey to the coordinates provided by Dr. Eleanor Chen, Kesithar stood once more on an observation deck watching the stars. Somewhere out there, in a station hidden for 3,000 years, the next chapter of galactic history was waiting to be written. And for the first time since he had ordered his fleet to break the Covenant, Commander Kesithar felt something that transcended military pride or cultural arrogance. He felt hope. He felt the possibility that perhaps, just perhaps, the greatest strength a civilization could possess was not the power to conquer, but the wisdom to recognize when they had been wrong, and the courage to change. The voyage would take 3 weeks. In that time, Kesithar intended to spend every moment preparing himself for what he might discover, not just about humanity, but about what his own species could become if they had the strength to admit they had been defeated not by weapons, but by their own limitations of vision. Dr. Eleanor Chen watched the Valorian vessel enter the coordinates she had provided. On the holographic display before her, she could see it approaching the massive station that had been hidden in plain sight for millennia. The structure was vast, a cathedral of human engineering and artistic vision, combined into something that transcended simple functionality. "They're coming," she said to the assembled consciousness around her, a blend of human minds, artificial intelligences, and hybrid entities that represented humanity's true evolution over the 4,000 years of the Covenant. "Will they understand?" asked one of the younger intelligences, one whose primary experience was studying alien species and their potential for growth. Eleanor smiled, and in that smile was the accumulated wisdom of 4,000 years of patient observation, careful preparation, and absolute faith in the possibility of redemption. "Eventually," she said, "that is what the next 4,000 years are for." The Valorian vessel docked with the station, and as Kesithar led his delegation into the vast atrium beyond the airlock, he understood that his species' true journey was only just beginning. The Covenant had not ended with his retreat. It had merely entered a new phase. And in the depths of the station, surrounded by wonders that showed what 4,000 years of unopposed development could create, Commander Kesithar finally understood what it meant to be humbled not into submission, but into growth. The real war, The struggle between what civilizations could be and what they chose to become had only just begun.